out for him to miss it. So the latest here, I mean, just now, we knew this on the weekend or ahead of the weekend here. In fact, I think it was Thursday night that the news about Trev White started being reported, but the Bills have announced it and made it official. And I guess two things I'd like from you. How nice, I'm assuming you feel it's like a really cool thing that they can bring Trev White back to the organization. So like that tugs at the heartstrings and feels good, I think, for a lot of the fans, and I'll bet a lot of the players too that are familiar with Trev White. And then what do you think it could mean to them on the field in 2025?
Yeah, very excited to see Trey back in that locker room. And he is an awesome dude. The guys will be really excited to have him back. He's on a one-year deal, so they don't make a long-term commitment to him, but understand that, prior to the injuries and really just prior to those injuries, he's playing at an all-pro level. And then, unfortunately, back-to-back years, he does an ACL and an Achilles, and then the Bills move on from him. And, he's had his ups and downs since he's left, but he's getting further and further removed from those injuries. Now he's not getting any younger in the process, and there's a lot of research out there about cornerbacks when they get around 30 years old and over kind of coming down in production. But we'll see what Trey still has left in the tank. He's very smart, savvy player, and I would love to see him regain some of that form prior to those injuries, just because with the career trajectory he was on, who knows how many Pro Bowls and what kind of run he would have had in Buffalo. And unfortunately, they had to make business decisions and move on from him. But to have him back, it's good for the locker room. Young guys can learn from him. And at that cornerback 2 spot, I mean, he might be our guy right now. And, I'm sure we'll get into the draft and whatnot. And there's still some available free agents out there at the quarterback position. And, teams will move on from players throughout the offseason as well. But where it stands right now, I think it's a really solid signing at this stage of the game.
If he ends up in a backup capacity, which I guess until we see him play, I guess I want to say that is still the scenario I'd be rooting for, that they find someone in the draft here to play opposite Benford and just sort of push everyone down the depth chart one rung with White, at the top of it behind whoever ends up starting. I wanted to ask you this about his voice in the room and him being the respected leader that he is. If he isn't the player that he's been and his playing time reflects that, how much can that mute a player in the leadership department? Because usually you got to be someone who's mattering to the outcomes on the field to an extent. At least I've heard that. I mean, how do you feel about that part of this?
No, and I see your point there. Now, Trey has done it on the field throughout his career, and he's played in this system before, so he understands the ins and outs of the system, which helps. And the fact that they can throw up some pretty serious highlight reels of this guy making plays in the league in this system helps him have a voice. Guys struggle to have a voice in the league when you haven't done it before. You know what I mean? You think about, in quarterback up in a backup role, those guys, while they might not be the loudest in the locker room, they're still going to have a really strong presence in a quarterback room, very similar to this. If the Bills end up drafting a guy early in the draft, he's going to be able to help that guy along, and that guy's going to understand and likely know who Trev White is.
Eric Wood, Bills radio color analyst and host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast, which you can find on all of your streaming services, here with us on the Wester Hotline on WGR. Well, before we get to the draft, and of course we will, you mentioned we'll get to it, how about the offseason to this point? I mean, one of the biggest things that stands out is that they signed 2 players who are going to miss 6 games. I guess we can talk a little bit about that, or a lot about that if you like, but on the whole, what do you think about what the Bills have done in this offseason so far in free agency?
Yeah, I think they did a nice job of combining like a Bosa signing that's got some high risk, high reward to it with some of his injuries. And, you get him on a pretty team-friendly deal. And it's just great to see these Bills-friendly deals at this point, because people want to come in here, they want to play with Josh Allen, they want to go compete for Super Bowls, they want to be a part of this culture. So you bring in a Bosa who's got some serious upside. I really like the Ogunjobi and Hoyt signings. Now, it's unfortunate that those guys are going to miss the first 6 games of the season, and was really caught off guard that to see both those guys catch suspensions like that. I feel like we're seeing less and less in those nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But it's unfortunate because you're almost going to have to build a roster coming out of training camp, especially in that defensive line room where it's going to look a lot different come 6 weeks later because those guys are going to be major contributors, and I'm excited about both those signings. But you're going to have some bodies, whether it's through the draft or some late signings, just to kind of get you to that seventh game. Now, you'd like to think that those guys come in fresh for that seventh game. They don't risk injury. Maybe that's a really welcomed kind of resurgence to the defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunate it happened. But I'm still excited about both those signings, and those guys aren't on one-year deals, so it's not like you miss, 30% or more of, the one-year deal you got on those guys. You already had some kind of insurance in Dane Jackson, and I've liked a lot of the signings that the Bills made. Josh Palmer at receiver is a guy that had Brandon Bean on the podcast. Super excited. He's super excited about what he can kind of bring to this offense. And so I thought they did a good job, but the biggest part of it was re-signing their own. And I know the James Cook thing still lingers out there, but, man, you find an offseason where you're able to give Josh Allen the deal that he wanted, one that he's excited about long-term, and then you get the other guys in Benford and Rousseau and
Bernard
here. Yeah, Bernard. I mean, they did a heck of a job of locking up a lot of the homegrown talent as well.
Yeah, I'm very excited about Hoyt and was really bummed out to hear about that 6-game suspension. It was notable to me that Bean said they knew about that when they signed him, so that's how much they wanted this player, that they were willing to live with that, and then they got the kind of sideswiped by the Ogunjobi suspension. On Palmer, how do you feel about the offense overall here? Because Eric, I feel like last year, everybody eats was the mantra in the summer and into September. We got 6 weeks in. There were a couple of rocky games in the passing game, and a third-round pick goes out the door for Amari Cooper. So they felt the need to pivot to someone who was, more of a traditional number one receiver. And even though it didn't work out that he produced that way here, they felt the need to go get that player. I'm wondering what's different this offseason, because I don't feel like Palmer rises to that level. I feel like he's somewhere on the graph between Mac Hollins and Amari Cooper, and that's a wide swath there. But I think he's somewhere in between. Do you think they've done enough at receiver?
I do, but I don't think when you listen to what Brandon and Sean said at the end of the season, someone that can stretch the field horizontally and vertically, I don't know that we got that player yet. Now, we'll see what we get from Palmer because Brandon Bean said it himself. There's a number of instances where he's open down the field. He just wasn't found on those routes with the Chargers. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But if they were to add someone with some serious speed, whether it's through the draft or this offseason, another point, that wouldn't surprise me because that's the one kind of element of this offense that could really put other teams in a bind. I mean, this is the second highest scoring offense in the league. You have the MVP at quarterback, highest scoring offense in Bills history through 16 games, even without that 17th game, so no asterisk on that. And so there's not a whole lot that needs to be done with the offense to, quote-unquote, fix it. But when you talk about really putting defenses in a bind, if you could put someone out there that just has some serious wheels where, okay, now we have to worry about this guy taking the top off the defense in addition to everything else that they bring to the table. Yeah, I think that would be the one thing that they would still be looking to add. That
is exactly where I am, Eric. I mean, I think, them being as productive as they were on offense. They had a great year on offense. There's no denying it. Allen wins the MVP. I feel like that almost is... it sounds a little silly to refer to that as a double-edged sword. But on one hand, I think it could allow you to think, it'll be fine. He'll make it work, right? He's a wizard. Josh Allen will figure it out, whoever we put out there with him. But the other side of that to me is lean into it. Get me another guy. Get me that speed element. I feel like I've been begging for more speed, especially in that passing offense, since they lost that first AFC title game in the 2020 season. So I think one more guy there that brings that element is like the thing I'm still looking for.
No, and I see your point completely there, and I'm with you. Yes, the Bills were incredible on offense last year. Teams are going to try and do all they can to adjust to what Joe Brady and this offense did. So trying to bring some type of different element, and that different element would be, just a burner out there on the field that, okay, so you're going to play man-to-man defense. Okay, now you're in a high-risk situation if you don't keep a safety over top of whoever this player is. Now, like I said, I'm not saying Curtis Samuel's that take the top off the defense guy, but when they brought him in last year, they assumed he was going to be their senior receiver, and he gets a turf toe injury in the preseason, which hampers him a lot. And this on the show during the season, like, turf toe injury, seems just so minor.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had it in the past and had to play with a metal plate in my shoe, and it's not very fun. But my game isn't predicated on speeding, be able to cut and make quick movements. It just needs a different
you
name.
Don't say.
People understand the severity. So people understand the severity of how much that can hamper a guy like Curtis Samuel. And look, people will be blowing me up on Twitter. I'm not saying that Curtis Samuel is the end-all, be-all. He's the guy when they refer to someone that can stretch the field. I'm just saying, when they brought him in last year, I'm assuming that's what they were envisioning more, and not just him in that kind of gadget role that we saw him hampered by the injury.
Right. Eric Wood on the West Her Hotline with us here, Bills Radio color analyst on WGR. You mentioned James Cook in the course of one of the answers here, and I don't know, maybe just how do you think this year goes? Like, what do you think is the most likely outcome for him, considering that he is under contract and the Bills have there's no compulsion other than, harmony, which is not nothing. But they don't have to address it if they can't find some common ground. What's the most likely outcome, you think, with James Cook in 2025, Eric?
I think the most likely outcome is he comes back and has another good season, and he's trying to prove himself of getting that big-time contract, whether that's from the Bills or somebody else. When you're a second rounder on your rookie contract still, I mean, I guess you could, but you're not in really a position to hold out and, cost yourself, through training camp, what is it, $20-something thousand a day, maybe more than that now. And so I don't know that you're in a position to do that, and it's not going to be a good look as you're trying to earn that second contract. And I just think that as much as they love and appreciate James Cook, I can't imagine that they can't have just adult conversations about, look, we're not at the same number right now. And, if you can get that from someone else eventually, maybe that works out. But the only way you get that is by having a season similar to what you had last year. We're going to help you do that. So I don't know. I think it'll play itself out to where James is back and he runs his tail off again. And that's how I would envision it happening, just because the way it sits right now, if the Bills really wanted to, they could franchise him the next 2 years where he still can't. I mean, the Bills just hold so much leverage over this situation.
Yeah.
It's different from some of the other situations we've seen from holdouts elsewhere.
It is uncommon. Like, the Bills have had a pretty smooth trip here through the McDermott Bean era. There was a Poyer year where he didn't come to some offseason stuff, but even that got settled. So this hasn't gotten bumpy yet, because we don't, there's nothing, he's not missing anything yet, although there's some voluntary stuff going on and we don't know if he's there or not. But it's been a pretty smooth ride. How much, if at all, could the Bills sort of, I don't know, using the leverage they've got, right? Using everything that's at their disposal, even if it gets to the franchise tag or whatever. But if they get this guy, that guy extended and spend money in free agency, but don't address James Cook, is there a problem in the room? Like, are players feeling badly for him, and does it manifest itself in some meaningful way, do you think?
I would say the way they took care of so many guys this offseason, it showed that they're willing to take care of their own. Now, if you're trying to get an unrealistic number, it showed that the Bills, maybe aren't going to get there. And that's just indications that I've caught through reading whatever on social media and online of, it just seems, and Brandon Beane said as much himself, that, there was just a separation of, where they found value there. So running backs are interesting, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you saw Saquon Barkley lead the Eagles to a Super Bowl last year, and everybody else would say, yeah, maybe I'll pay a running back. And so I think the league's still kind of split on whether you give out that second contract to a big-time running back. Now, I will say this about James Cook. He didn't take a ton of hits in college. He wasn't used a ton at Georgia, so he doesn't come in with all those SEC hits that you see a lot of running backs that come out of Alabama and Georgia and whatnot. So he comes in a little bit cleaner than most, and while this year they really used him as a feature back, throughout his time with the Bills, he hasn't taken that kind of workload. And so I would say that he would appear to be a cleaner guy to be able to pay for that second contract. But we've just seen too many times throughout NFL history, you pay those running backs and they go downhill quickly. But in my opinion, he's a guy that I think you could give that second contract to and feel confident about it.
Yeah, to me, as long as it doesn't rise to the level of like the what he's talking about, right? Because part of that wear and tear point, Eric, is he's playing under 50% of the snaps as a pro in the NFL. Barkley's closer to 80% of the snaps. I mean, that's a big variance to me, and I don't want the Bills to use Cook more. Like, their mix in the backfield, like I'd sign up for another year of what they did, how they handled the snaps there last year. So I'm not itching to get Cook on the field more. I think that would lessen his effectiveness, but all the same, the fact that he isn't on the field more should limit how much I'm going to pay him year to year.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And to me, he brings tremendous value. And, I mean, the progression I've seen with him as a running back, that really they brought him in. They thought he was going to be more of a receiver, kind of a third down back, in the way that he runs with pace and vision, and he sets up blocks, and he can hit the home run. He can get to tough yards. They use him pretty much as a goal line back this year. They had so much confidence in him in those situations. He shows up in big games. He shows up in the playoffs. And so to me, really excited the way he's developed as a pro. And look, you could tell that McDermott and Beane heading into the offseason didn't maybe expect to have these conversations, because all they did in the postseason press conference was brag on him as a person, as a player, and which I'm sure his agents are using, just throwing that in the Bills through those negotiations.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we've only got a few minutes left here, and I don't want to treat like the Saturday part of the draft as a throwaway. Maybe we'll have a moment or two on the end of this. But what's your ideal Thursday, Friday this week for the Bills, with their pick at 30 in round 1 and then the 2 picks in round 2 on Friday at 56 and 62?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'd love to see some help on the defense side of the football. Whether that's at corner, whether that's at defensive tackle or defensive end, that's not earth-shattering there. But we've talked about it many times on the show that I just truly feel like we need to take some swings to find a difference maker on the defensive line, in an impact guy. Can you get that at 30? I'm not sure, but take some swings. There's rumors of defensive tackles. The kid from Michigan, Grant, he's 6'4", 331. He's got some explosion as well. Can he be a guy that maybe frees up in Ed Oliver a little bit more? Or, on the edges, is there some guys that are free on the edge that we think can get to these quarterbacks in the playoffs? I think if you can shore up that defensive line, that's going to help out the entire defense, honestly. You get that defensive line right, then your secondary is always going to look better as well. But there's some interesting cornerback prospects as well. And if the Bills have a guy that they love at 30, or move around and grab one of those guys that can come in, be a day one starter. I mean, a lot of times in the draft, I'm not saying you always take best player available or go for the guys that are in positions that get paid the most money, but cornerbacks are starting to get paid a lot of money in this league. And if you think you got a guy that can come in, be a day one starter, and you get him for 4 years on that rookie deal, man, that looks pretty appealing as well.
Yeah, and a fifth-year option. I mean, that costs more too, but still, it's still a tool you've got that can help you keep the players' money down at least for the first few years of that. All right. Well, what does the draft hold for you? Are you working anything? You got anything to promote here, or just the usual the podcast? And I mean, Derby time's around the corner here for you too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Kentucky Derby's next week, so that'll be a lot of fun. And then, this week we'll have another episode of the Center on Buffalo podcast coming out. We'll have some more draft talk. Last week I had Chris Trapasso on, and he did an awesome job breaking down the draft, better than I ever could, with the amount of time that he spends on the draft. And so I'll be watching Thursday. Last year I stayed up and the Bills traded out, and I regretted missing out on so much sleep. But no, I always enjoy the draft. It's nostalgic. Going back to 2009 when the Bills drafted me in the first round, it was an absolute dream come true. And, watching these guys out there. Now, my daughter gets into it. She likes, the outfits and the hoopla.
Yeah.
My son recognizes some of it and all that. So it's a fun deal. And I'll say this, and I feel like I put this on Twitter more than I probably should. At some point, Buffalo needs to host the NFL draft. It just needs to happen. They need to rotate the draft around to cities that aren't likely going to host Super Bowls based on their climate or size. And Roger Goodell's got to bring, I'm hoping it's, once this new stadium opens, give Buffalo the draft.
Yeah, I heard through the grapevine, I'm not sure I assume it's out there publicly, but I know Pete Goelli has said they're sending a team to study, sort of look at what Green Bay's doing in preparation to make a proposal. I feel like, Eric, you get a new stadium like that, you're out of the running in the Super Bowl for the reasons you mentioned. I feel like the draft, if you're going to go to Green Bay, you're going to go to Cleveland, you're going to Detroit, recognize that Buffalo is smaller than those cities, but Green Bay, I'd be stunned if the Bills don't get a draft in like 28 or somewhere, at some point here early on in the new stadium's life.
I agree, and I think that Buffalo will show out as well or better than any other NFL draft host site, and it'll be a fun destination for people to come to if they haven't been. But the people in Western New York will support it so much. It'll be a ton of fun.
Thanks a lot for the time, Eric. Continued success with the podcast, and have a great time at the Derby and all that, and the golf game too. We'll look forward to connecting at some point in the summer.
Yep, sounds great. Always good catching up, Bulldog.